In the meantime, Congress rushing to approve an additional $225 million for Israel and its so-called Iron Dome. That dome is Israel's missile defense system and has saved quite a few number of lives by deflecting missiles before it's too late. No matter, the United Nations is calling it a mistake. In other words, our aid to beef up this dome a mistake. To Mike Huckabee, it says it's the UN. That's a mistake. Governor, good to see you again. What do you
make of that? Good to see you. Well, first of all, the big mistake is that the U.S. is still giving a dime to the United Nations. This organization has so embarrassed itself. I mean, to tell Israel that it ought to give the technology of the Iron Dome to Hamas, a terrorist organization, because, after all, they might want to use that technology to protect themselves against the rockets that are only being fired because they started firing rockets into civilian territories in Israel. Israel isn't that stupid. I mean, to let Hamas have the Iron Dome is like putting Jeffrey Dahmer in charge of being a food critic for the New York Times. I mean,
well,
this
it
is
is weird, though. I mean, it's very clear where the UN is siding on this issue. That
yes.
Once again, it's Israel overdoing it. But even some backers of Israel are saying that its response has been tipped. What do you say?
Well, I think they're wrong. I mean, what else is Israel going to do? They're fighting for their existence. They're not trying to take the territory of Gaza. They didn't create the strikes. They didn't draw first blood. They are trying to defend their country, and they're trying to make sure that their children don't have to rush to a bomb shelter every few minutes because Hamas is indiscriminately firing their rockets at civilian targets. When Israel hits civilian targets, they regret it. When Hamas hits civilian targets, they celebrate it. This is not a good guy versus good guy. This is good guy, bad guy. There's a clear difference here. There is not symmetry. And the craziness of the UN, the person in charge of the so-called Human Rights Committee of the UN, made up of such wonderful examples of human rights champions like North Korea and China and Russia and Cuba. Those are the people who make up, and Saudi Arabia. And they're condemning Israel. Well, I would say that's a real plus for Israel, that they're being condemned by idiots at the UN who somehow think human rights are being championed in the countries like I've mentioned.
You know, it's interesting, too, Governor, that the reason for Israel the response is the discovery of these tunnels and how sophisticated a network they were to penetrate Israel. Yet not a mention by the UN, not a mention by much of the press across the world.
Nor a mention of the fact that in 3 of the sites that they whined about, oh, the Israelis hit a school, those schools were housing Hamas rockets. And what did they do when they went through the rubble? They gave the rockets in that school back to Hamas. That's why the president, yes, they did, 3 different occasions.
Wow.
What the president should say is, not only are we done with Hamas, but we're done with the UN. We're not going to waste another dime of U.S. taxpayer money on this ridiculous organization.
Wow. Something tells me you might be getting into this weekend. Or?
I'm sure we will.
Yeah. Look forward to the show. It's a hit show. He's a hit guy, and he's a very nice guy. And he, of course, if he runs for president, he has already said he's telling me first. Right?
Absolutely.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.